Coming up on Arirang News, the United States expands emergency use of the Pfizer vaccine to children as young as 12, based on an efficacy rate of 100%. South Korea's vaccine campaign, meanwhile, is still going slow, but there are millions more doses on the way starting Friday. South Korea's exports are up this month so far by more than 81% compared to a year ago. Shipments picking up in cars, car parts, and petroleum products. And data show how the pandemic has changed the way South Korean consumers spend money. They've spent far less money in person, but have kept buying durable goods like appliances. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. The United States is going to start administering Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine now to kids as young as 12. The FDA has expanded its emergency authorization. And now a study in the UK suggests that a dose of Pfizer combined with a dose of AstraZeneca can reduce the risk of death from the virus by 80%. Lee Kyung-eun reports.
U.S. regulators have expanded approval for Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine for children aged 12 to 15. The FDA expanded its emergency authorization after reviewing clinical data, which showed the vaccine's efficacy to be 100% and that it's well tolerated. The decision makes Pfizer's vaccine the first in the U.S. to be authorized for children 15 and under. The vaccine had previously been authorized only for those 16 and older. U.S. President Joe Biden has called for swift mobilization to ready vaccinations immediately. But the actual inoculations for this new group will not begin until the CDC's recommendation, which comes on Wednesday. If given the green light, another 5% of the U.S. population, nearly 17 million more people, will be eligible to get the shots. Pfizer is also planning to seek approval for children between 2 and 11 years old in September. Its vaccine safety and efficacy study in children ages 6 months to 11 years old is ongoing. In the meantime, recent data from the UK shows both Pfizer's and AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine reduced the risk of death from COVID-19 by up to 80% after the first dose. The figure rises to 97% for Pfizer's vaccine after the second dose. This is based on findings by Public Health England, which analyzed new COVID-19 cases in people by vaccination status who died within 28 days after testing positive. The study is the first real-world data on COVID-19 vaccine protection against mortality. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
South Korea reported a slight increase today in new cases of COVID-19. The country's vaccine campaign, though, has been slow in recent days because not enough doses are being delivered. But that could change soon with the delivery of millions more doses from AstraZeneca. Han Sung-woo has more.
South Korea reported 511 new cases of COVID-19 on Tuesday, the daily figure rising by almost 50 cases compared to the previous day. 483 of them were transmitted locally, with around 2/3 from the capital region. These include cluster infections at a university hospital in Seoul and a missionary center in Gyeonggi-do province. There were also outbreaks at a Buddhist temple and a vinyl greenhouse in Gyeongsangbuk-do province. Variants from overseas remain a threat as well. Out of Tuesday's 28 imported COVID-19 cases, more than a third are believed to come from India. The virus claimed the lives of 4 more people, raising the death toll to 1,879. As for the vaccine campaign, first doses were given on Monday to another 8,341 people. However, supply issues remain an issue as not enough doses are arriving on time to meet demand. Some 3.7 million people in South Korea have now received their first dose. That's about 7.2% of the population. A little over 2 million people have received the AstraZeneca vaccine and 1.66 million the shot from Pfizer. Around 77,000 people have received their second dose, raising that particular total to just under 600,000. Authorities are hoping fresh batches from AstraZeneca will help vaccinations pick up pace. 7.23 million doses will get delivered throughout South Korea starting Friday. and those waiting for their second dose are expected to be prioritized. Second doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine are scheduled to start on Friday, the same day the first batches are delivered. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
And the WHO has classified the COVID-19 variant first identified in India as a variant of global concern, with preliminary studies showing it spreads more easily than other strains. It's the fourth variant to be named a global concern after the so-called UK, South African, and Brazilian variants, which means it'll require heightened tracking and analysis. The WHO says the Indian variant was first identified in December, although an earlier version was spotted in October. U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo is reportedly planning to hold a virtual meeting on the global shortage of semiconductors. Bloomberg cites multiple people familiar with the plans as saying that the meeting will be held on May 20th, bringing together both chip suppliers and consumers. The companies invited include General Motors, Ford, TSMC of Taiwan, and South Korea's Samsung Electronics. The Commerce Department reportedly said in the invitations that the meeting aims to foster, as they put it, an open dialogue around semiconductors and supply chain matters. A major network of fuel pipelines in the U.S. remains shut down due to a ransomware attack last Friday by hackers demanding money, raising concerns over a spike in fuel prices. The company, called Colonial Pipeline, said Monday that its major fuel lines are still down, but other smaller lines are back online. The company is aiming to be fully operational by this weekend. The Russia-based hacking group DarkSide has claimed responsibility, though they have since said they're sorry for causing trouble and they only wanted to make money. The White House says it's working closely with Colonial, calling the pipeline fix a top priority. South Korea's exports during the first 10 days of May soared by more than 80% on year. Preliminary data from the Korea Customs Service show exports from May 1st to the 10th came to nearly $12.5 billion US. Even when the number of working days is taken into account and there was a holiday, the daily average was up about 65% on year. Shipments of automobiles rose by around 360% and automobile parts by 317%. Exports of petroleum products were up about 130% and semiconductors by around 52%. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, good afternoon. Thank you for coming on.
Good afternoon.
Well, it seems the Biden administration's massive stimulus and the reopening of the American economy is leading to some of the inflation that many had said would come. Prices rising sharply for food, home appliances, other goods. What kind of effect do you think this will have on the global markets?
Obviously, if you look at the overall equity market, it is taking that as a quite negative news that inflation numbers are coming in quite sharply. If you look at the U.S. inflation number in March, it came in at 2.6% year on year, which is quite significantly higher than the target of 2%. However, though, that number is probably skewed because of the basis of year-on-year number, given the fact that the March of last year was quite poor due to the COVID-19. But on a month-on-month basis also, it was up about 0.6%. So clearly there is signs of inflation. Most of these inflations are coming on the basis of the cost push inflation because of most of the raw material costs are rising quite rapidly, including iron ore, copper, and various other raw materials. And that is pushing the inflation up for the time being. However, if you look at on a longer-term basis, we don't think that the inflation number is going to be that significant, and it will be probably stabilizing below 2% level. And if you look at China's annual inflation numbers, it did jump, but still it's only showing about 0.9% year-on-year in April. If you look at probably U.S., the number will be quite sharp because of the COVID-19 recovery. But going into the longer-term basis, most likely, once again, inflation is going to stabilize due to demand pull inflation-wise is not going to be that significant because if you look at the numbers such as unemployment ratios and the salary increases, all indicates that the modest pace of inflation from the demand pull inflation side. So once the short term of cost push inflation dies down, then most likely the inflation is going to stabilize. So the equity market implication is going to be short-lived.
Well, as you referenced, stocks on Wall Street were down from their recent highs overnight. The decline led by tech shares. The Dow briefly rose above 35,000, but those gains were all gone by the end of the session, and the futures indicate another rout tomorrow for the Nasdaq at least. Tell us about the global markets on Monday and what caused this decline in tech.
Right. Once again, this uncertainty about the inflation numbers and that possibility of tapering is causing the volatility in the equity market. If you look at the Nasdaq, it plunged more than 2% yesterday, and also S&P 500 was finished sharply lower on Monday, as the investors continues to ditch the growth and technology names and buying these inflation-sensitive stocks, and continue to worry about the inflation and the higher taxes. The news of these attack on the pipeline also caused some uncertainties in terms of the overall economic recovery because of these costs going up quite sharply on the fuels as well as the most of the raw material side. However, most likely that this pace of the uncertainty is going to gradually die down as we expect the economic growth rate to stabilize after the sharp recovery due to the pent-up demand. And also inflation numbers, once again, is going to stabilize, probably going into the longer-term basis. For the short-term technical basis, people are selling the growth stock and buying value stocks, and that seems to be continuing probably for the time being. But we don't think that this will last till the winter or fall time or 4 seasons. In the short term, however, though, people will be concerned about this further rise of inflation and also rising interest rate environment and the possibility of tapering by the U.S. Fed.
Well, here in Korea yesterday, the Kospi rose to a new high, but today it closed sharply lower in line with what we saw in the U.S. and possibly for similar reasons. Tell us what's the story in the local market?
Right. Kospi fell by about 0.23% today. And also Kosdaq was down about 1.43%. So quite sharp drop after hitting the record high closing yesterday. Continuation of this uncertainty about U.S. interest rate and tapering issues. People are quite concerned about what might happen to Korea in terms of economic recovery. If you look at the U.S. inflation expectations, everybody are saying that it's going to be probably coming in at well above 3% in April. This is highest in decade because of this economy reopening from the COVID-19 related shutdowns. And that's obviously causing Korea to be quite uncertain. However, as you said earlier, if you look at the export numbers and economic recovery in terms of the seasonality factors, Korea is one of the most strongest in terms of the growth rate in terms of GDP, as well as export numbers and the earnings growth rate. So yes, there are concerns about these uncertainties due to the higher interest rate environment, but if you look at the overall fundamentals and the earnings growth rate and GDP growth rate, we think that Korea can recover from the current corrections. In terms of the earnings growth, Korea is the largest, expecting over 40% year-on-year growth rate in earnings this year. That would probably fuel into further rise in equities in a longer-term basis.
Right, and a minute ago we heard about the fuel pipeline in the U.S. that's been shut down for several days now because of a ransomware attack. That pipeline reportedly supplies 45% or so of the gasoline and jet fuel to the east coast of the U.S. Tell us a little bit more about that, and also for oil, prices holding steady about where they've been for a couple of months.
Right. If you look at the oil price in general, it is up more than 30% so far this year. on back of this improved demand outlook due to the successful vaccine rollout. And now we are hitting to the territory that might be causing too much of inflation. So therefore, we think that this is a bit of a cautious right now. And the recent rise that we saw yesterday at the beginning of the session was because of this news of temporary closure of the largest U.S. fuel pipelines due to a cyber attack. And we don't think that this is going to last for a longer-term basis. It's going to be probably short-lived. And by the end of this week, it's going to be all normalizing. So if that's the case, then it all depends on the demand and supply picture. And we think that the overall supply picture is quite ample, and therefore oil prices should remain at below $65 per barrel. Right now, it is showing some corrections to $64.17 per barrel for WTI. It's down by about 1.2%. We think that the box range of the WTI and oil prices is expected in the future, anywhere between $60 to $65 in the longer-term basis. Because demand is there. However, the supply is quite significant. And there's changes in paradigm, the fact that a lot of more demand for the renewable energy rather than the fossil fuel energies. So all in all, we think that the oil prices should, in the future, normalize. But still, nevertheless, it is higher by 30% year to date.
Got it. All right, Mr. Yu, thanks so much for sharing your insights with us today. As always, we appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
The COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way South Korean households spend money. Last year, people spent less in person and more online. Interestingly, while spending was down overall, people actually did spend more on big things like cars and appliances. Min Soo-kyun reports.
In its latest report on Tuesday, the Korea Development Institute said the COVID-19 pandemic led to an almost 10% drop in overall household spending last year. In particular, the outbreak led to a 5% fall in face-to-face household consumption, but brought about a 4% uptick in contactless shopping. The state-run think tank attributed the change to strict social distancing measures and mounting concerns over the virus. It also explained that the consumption trends in 2020 appear to be different from previous economic downturns.
Despite the economic slowdown caused by COVID-19, durable goods consumption has increased by a large margin, and this behavior is quite different from that of the past crises.
Usually, when the economy is in a slump, households cut unnecessary spending, such as purchases of durable goods, but last year, countless consumption centered around durable goods. In particular, the 20% bracket on the highest income spent more on cars, while consumers in the third and fourth highest brackets, the middle-income groups, spent more on furniture and home appliances. However, overall consumer spending fell for all income groups except the lowest 20%. This partially implies that this group, which was hit hard by the pandemic, used the government's COVID-19 relief funds to support their spending rather than for saving. The Korea Development Institute expects household consumptions and especially face-to-face shopping to recover once the pandemic dies down. Min Soo-kyun, Arirang News.
The pandemic has also threatened the survival of many airlines around the world. South Korean carriers have had to take extraordinary measures to make it through, and some have been quite creative. They're serving in-flight meals in cafes on land for people who want to remember what it's like to travel. And they're removing passenger seats from their planes to make room for cargo. Kim Sung-min reports.
I'm in front of a boarding gate with my airline ticket, and it seems like I'm all ready to board a flight. But in fact, I'm not at an airport, but at a cafe in Hongdae, which serves in-flight meals. South Korean carrier Jeju Air has opened this cafe for those missing air travel. A kind greeting from the flight attendants, mug plane windows, and popular in-flight meals could bring back memories of flights to exotic places without having to board an actual plane.
I guess the fact that I can enjoy the excitement of boarding a plane here makes this in-flight meal even better here.
This drawing from customers saying cheer up aviation industry shows how this place could bridge the gap until life gets back to normal.
All the flight attendants here, including me, were very touched, and I hope the pandemic ends soon so I can serve the customers up in the air again.
COVID-19 has halted most of overseas travel, but not the actual flights. As the number of South Koreans traveling overseas plummeted by 84.2% last year, Korean Air took the seats out of some passenger planes and turned them into cargo planes. More than 4,500 flights carry freight instead of passengers in 2020, including the COVID-19 vaccines that require complex technology like cold chain systems.
We received an international standard verification for pharmaceutical logistics. We're also one of the leading carriers for handling special cargo that requires high tech, including artworks from the Louvre and Musée d'Orsay.
While the carrier's sales from passenger flights decreased by 74% last year, cargo sales were up 66%. Thanks to this, while airlines around the world posted losses, Korean Air in 2020 managed to post an operating profit of $213 million. Many people are hoping that air travel can soon get back to normal as the vaccine rollout picks up pace, but until then, airlines will keep looking for innovative ways to stay in business. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
The debate continues over whether the Olympics in Tokyo should go ahead or not. Now, with a little over 2 months until opening day, the leader of Japan's main opposition party says there's no way for the games to be held safely, suggesting that he, like most of the Japanese people, want them called off. The number of new daily cases of the coronavirus in Japan recently has been at record high levels. Lee Sung-jae has more.
With the Tokyo Olympics just several weeks away, the leader of Japan's main opposition party is questioning Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga's assurances that the games can be held safely. Yukio Edano, head of the Constitutional Democratic Party of Japan, said Monday that it's impossible to protect the lives, health, and livelihoods of the Japanese people while holding a global sporting event. Edano said it would be unacceptable if the games lead to new COVID-19 variants being brought in from overseas. He also slammed the government for prematurely lifting the previous state of emergency in late March, saying it caused the number of virus cases to rebound quickly. Asked during a parliamentary committee meeting whether the Olympics will go on even if COVID-19 infections continue to spike in Japan, Suga insisted he has never put the Olympics ahead of the Japanese public.
I've never put the Olympics first. My priority has been to protect the lives and health of the Japanese population. Let me address that clearly. In terms of the Olympic and Paralympic Games, it is important that we must first prevent the spread of the virus.
Japan on Monday reported 4,937 new COVID-19 cases, despite fewer tests being done over the weekend. That's the highest number of cases reported in Japan on a Monday since the start of the pandemic. The country also reported a record 1,152 critically ill patients. However, the IOC, the organizers of the Tokyo Olympics, and the Prime Minister himself continue to insist the Games will go on in a safe and secure way. However, a recent opinion poll by the Japanese daily The Yomiuri Shimbun showed nearly 60% of the Japanese public wanted the Games to be called off. Lee Sung-jae, Arirang News.
An archaeological excavation in downtown Seoul has uncovered traces of a street made in the Joseon Dynasty, where 6 major government offices were located hundreds of years ago. This administrative street, found at Gwanghwamun Square, where a redesigning project is underway, had offices for finance, law, defense, and other government functions. The city of Seoul plans to finish the excavation by the end of this month and then decide how they're going to preserve the site. The city's been excavating this area since 2019, looking for cultural assets. From May 21st to the 29th, the site will be open to the public twice a day, but there's a capacity limit, so visitors should apply for the tour at the Gwanghwamun Square website. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.